Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Javier Lozano Jr. Javier is a fractional CMO and a CRO who's been helping B2B tech companies build predictable go-to-market engines. He's a former tech CMO who scaled revenue from $1 million to about $20 million in under 4 years. Javier, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Thank you, Krish. I really am looking forward to this opportunity. Looking forward to just kind of talking shop.
My pleasure. If can you give a brief introduction about yourself and what you do to our audience, and then we can just get into the topic.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a fractional CMO and CRO. So I basically like to come in and work with CEOs and founder-led companies that are looking to start, scaling their company, whether it's a startup mode or kind of a scale-up mode. They're probably in the 1 million to 10 million or so, maybe a little bit more than that, depending where they're at. And they're trying to align marketing and sales so they can start creating more predictable pipeline. And so my goal is to come in and work with these companies and start creating a foundation for them so that when it comes to growing predictably, they actually have like a foundation of where they can say, hey, we're going to bring in some new team members to do this. And we know that we've got the right enablement that's going to make them successful in all those areas. And so that's kind of where my primary focus tends to focus at the moment. I've been doing it since about October or so.
Lovely. You're talking to somebody who runs a startup, right? So I think there's plenty I can learn during the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
By way of introduction, right? We have a few products in production. The first of which we launched about 5 years ago, and most recent API product that we launched on AWS Marketplace was a little bit more than a year and a half ago. So that's a little bit about us as a company. But let's just jump right into the topic, right? So we have a few things that we want to talk about today, right? One of the first things is, you mentioned scaling companies, right? Startups and helping them grow. Maybe that's not a bad place to start. Can you tell us what the initial interaction looks like? Like, who is it? You can even take us as an example, Snowpal, for
Yeah.
instance. How does that initial process, or how does that interaction work? What are you looking to learn, and what are you looking to tell your potential clients how you could help them? And then let's go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I tend to always like to start off with just when I'm engaging a new client, we always start off with like what I call as a go-to-market audit, or where I come in and kind of just like get an assessment over the entire, what's working, what's not working. And it's everything from looking at your CRM to looking at your tech stack to looking at what kind of marketing technology are you using as well too. To also interviewing certain team members, some leaders. If you're a tech company or a SaaS company, we're looking at kind of like how some of these things are getting built out. We're also looking at the RevOps. So we're going to be looking, if you have HubSpot as an example, we'll start diving into HubSpot. How are these leads getting tracked from, coming in, stages? Is it all pretty clean? What kind of automations do we have created? And then what's that customer success look like as well too? So once they actually close, what's that life cycle, how long it takes? And then what does it look like moving forward after closing those deals? So I come in looking at it from a very holistic point of view. I'm just understanding what's going on, because in reality, like a doctor, I can't make a recommendation without understanding what could be, what the diagnostics are. So I can't tell you need to take this prescription and this prescription until I make an assessment of what is bothering you, what's hurting. A lot of the times when I'm doing that, things come up. I start seeing like, hey, we could probably fix this right here, really quick fix, no big deal, and we'll take care of it. Other times it's like, okay, we need to implement this new software. We need to probably start, building out this new piece of the strategy because you're missing out on, revenue opportunities. So when I come in, working with new engagements, it's really just more of an audit overall. And then we start kind of building out the strategy. And usually it's going to be like about a 90-day roadmap, if you will. And this roadmap is going to give us like the game plan. It's going to say, hey, this is what we're going to be focused on over the next 90 days. And so we'll have prioritizations. And usually it's going to be the ones that are going to be the most effective, or the ones that are going to be the most impactful for the company in that time frame. Because what I see a lot of times is people come in and they start saying, well, we need to change your messaging. We need to change your website. We need to update this. We need to update that. And sometimes you don't need to do all those things. You need to find where you can get the most leverage.
That's a wonderful introduction. I'm going to pick your brain for the next 45 minutes straight up, because everything that you're telling us there not only makes sense, it's stuff that we've actually not had as a company when we got started, perhaps even now. So, and I can appreciate the challenges that come alongside not having someone like you who's
Yeah.
part of the team, essentially, right? So, I'm not making this up. I'm just being genuine here. I'll tell
Okay.
you that, to give you a little bit of a background, I'm an engineering founder, and I know a lot
Yep.
of people are founders. I talk to folks on this platform who are engineering founders. We, we've built software for a while. A lot of us, uh, and we have some sense of how to go about building software,
Hmm.
and we tend to also incorrectly believe that that's the only thing that ought to be done. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm guilty as charged here along the way. And it was not until we launched our first product, or almost even the second one, when we got it working, did we even think about everything else outside the periphery of engineering per se. And we
Yep.
incorrectly believe that you have the best product, someone's going to break through your front door, grab it and go, right? And you're
Yep.
good to go. And then
Exactly.
that reality is far from it, right? I mean, there's plenty you've got to do before the world recognizes what you're building, why you're building it, or if you should even be building it. So with that as context, Javier, can you give us some, I'm going to throw a few questions here. If there's one too many, please ignore
No, go for it,
the
man.
noise there.
I love it.
uh, Thing is, right, let's say one of the first things we built, I'm going to take, it's a project management platform, right? I
Hmm.
can take that as an example. Now, we had an idea, we saw a problem in the market, we started building it. And we didn't have anyone that was a non-engineer in the team. In hindsight, we could have and we should have, right? No denying that. What does it mean? When do we engage someone like you in the team? How do you help us find product market fit? And what is the role you play, and at what stages per se? And you can make a bunch of assumptions that you want to hear, but let's say we don't have any code, or maybe you can assume that we have some code or even a prototype per se, because in
Hmm.
this day and age with AI, everybody's got a prototype.
Yeah.
Where do you start engaging? How do you tell whether this idea even makes sense, perhaps without hurting the founders, or even if you have to hurt them, emotionally, saying this doesn't make sense? How does that process look like? And do you take whatever it is and try to make that work, or do you sometimes say, you know what, this doesn't make any sense, I can't help you?
Yeah. So it's a lot to unpack there. And so this is where I think the most important part as a marketing leader is that we can't going in with like a preconceived notion of like this is going to solve everything. This is what I did in my last company. This is what I did in my last client, because those aren't going to work. What we need to do is we need to kind of look at what's going on. So like how I would look at it is like if you're talking about the software for project management as an example, there's a ton of project management softwares out there. You got Monday.com, you've got all these other, Asana, you've got, all of them, right? And so what I want to know is what makes yours different? Why is yours better than these other project management softwares? Because you're going to be going against these incumbents that have been on the marketplace for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They have funding, they have the engineers to continue to add and develop. And then on top of that, what are we doing that's going to be creating our moat over time? What is that going to look like? Because you know this all the time as an engineer, like you've got some great things, but you know that there's a dude in their garage that's just coding just like you, and they're going to come out with something a lot faster, and so we need to see like what that project, that timeline, that project timeline of like what's going to set you apart. Now, is that going to be the thing that makes you all the millions that you're looking for? Not necessarily, but we need to find where we can make our stake in the ground. And what I love to do is like once we figure that piece out, we start building a story around that. And we wonder like, hey, if we build a story and a narrative and a positioning, statement about around this that makes us different, then can we actually go to market with this? Is this going to be compelling to other people that have these other problems? And if we're not really sure, then we're going to have to find it. We're going to have to find, some either test users or beta users, or find a network of folks that are like, I'm demanding this. Monday doesn't do it. Asana doesn't do it. These other project management, softwares don't do it. The idea is to really kind of find out where does this fit. But once we kind of get that part, I really believe that you're building out that messaging and that positioning strategy, because you're going to be going into an ocean, a red ocean, where you're going to get pushed down very easily. But if you know how to spin it and just kind of just take it a different direction, it's a great way to kind of make you stand apart. One of my examples I love to use a lot is, you've probably heard of the company Intercom. We all have. Chat platform, very big, a few years ago. Maybe it's kind of becoming a little bit more tapered, but other companies came in, like Drift was another company that was going directly against them. What Drift did differently, though, is that they went after the marketing people. They looked at it as like, hey, we're a marketing enablement. We help marketers do better on communication, doing this. While Intercom was focused more on the sales side. And they're like, hey, we're going to convert your leads in a sales perspective. And so now I'm dumbing it down very, low. Like there's probably more behind the scenes. Where I'm getting to is that, like, though you're probably offering similar things, it's a matter of how you position the product out there. And then eventually you start learning that you've got product market fit because it starts actually hitting. And then you start figuring out, okay, who's this audience? Where do they reside? Where do they hang out? Do they go to these conferences? Are they part of a community? And then you start kind of like essentially bringing on these beta users to say, hey, we have this new thing. Let us know what you think. So that's kind of how I would start it off, is really kind of start thinking about those pieces, but also challenge the engineers and be like, we can't just put something out there just because like we have an idea. We've got to think about into the future, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And that's tough and challenging. But that's where I would probably start off with.
A lot of great points there. I'm going to just, ask you a bunch of questions in no particular order. And this is coming from two sides, right? One is from everything that you're sharing with us here that we sure obviously appreciate, Javier, but also with the experience that I've had in the past, right, over the years. So it's a combination of those two things. Yeah. So the number of things that you mentioned, and even the ones I do agree with from what you said, I'm going to sometimes pretend to disagree just to hear both sides of the story.
Yeah,
right?
I love it.
So what you said was, you mentioned a number of key points. One is moat, right? What is it that you're selling that makes you different from somebody else? Yep. And I think I'll mention a number of things here, and then we'll get into each of those items. You talked about marketing strategies a little bit. You also talked about, the communities, the end users who are going to be consuming these products, talking to developers and the team about thinking about the future, not be very married to their ideas per se, right? I'm paraphrasing some of what you said, but that's sort of, what the gist of what I got. The first point is moat, extremely important. Yep. Let's take the same example, project management software. The initial questions would be, hey, you took some great examples there already. There's Asana, there's Monday, there's Atlassian's got a lot of products, and there's no dearth of companies building project management software, right? Mm-hmm. There's ClickUp, and the list keeps going on. And every time I join a team, when you're helping them out, they use something else that I've never ever heard of before, right? And then you recognize that there is more. And sometimes it's regional, depending on which part of the world the team happens to be located. Other times it's something you're familiar with. The first question I have here, Javier, is how do we define moat? And here is what I mean by that. Okay. When Asana launched their product, I'm pretty sure Monday was there, or vice versa. And when either of them launched their products, I'm pretty sure Atlassian was around because they've been around forever, probably for the past 2 decades. And there's any number of project management tools that are out there. So two ways I would put this. My first question is, hey, we found a gap that none of these tools seem to solve, so we built something. I mean, that's a difficult answer, because even if they don't solve those problems exactly the way you want for them to solve them, they might address them in some way, form, or shape, right? Yep. But is there an argument to, there are like 10 other restaurants on the street that sell Italian food, but I still have a reason and a desire to open this 11th restaurant. If I said that as a founder, what are some questions you might ask me to have me come to reality? Yeah. So I would take a step and think about what makes your product or service different, and really just kind of mapped out that journey. Is it because there's things that are going to be table stakes, and it's just what it is. Like you can't say like, well, we believe in customer service. Like that's table stakes. Like at the end of the day, like you should be offering good service. Is it that you have more human interaction? Is it that we create faster response time from A to B? Or is it that we can, like the user has better flexibility on, the UI and how it's done, where they have more flexibility in kind of creating their task or whatever. So where I'm coming from is like, we've got to start nailing down some of these pieces. I don't want to call them features and benefits and lead with that, but we need to start kind of digging down a lot of layers. So I'm going to be asking a ton of questions. I'm not going to be just honing into one thing. And then once I ask several of those questions, there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3, like, why did you bring this up?
what do they do? What does Asana do that like, tell me more about this. Like, why does this make people upset? And so what I want to find out is, what are the things that we can agitate other users that are experiencing something? Because a buyer is going to buy something based on their feelings, their agitations, what makes them very upset. They're not going to buy something like, well, that's kind of cool, it's just another software. It doesn't work that way. Once we find like 2 or 3 of these things that are common, they're like, oh, that's almost the same thing, and you can bucket them, then that allows you to kind of like say, okay, this is an agitation that's happening in the marketplace. Everyone is getting ticked off about this. Like, a great example would be, Salesforce is I'm not knocking Salesforce when I say this, but they're almost too big for most startup companies. And then you kind of have HubSpot that kind of fills this gap. And then there's other ones that are smaller. And we know that HubSpot is a little bit bigger and they can play into the enterprise world. But what I'm saying is that HubSpot came in and positioned themselves as like yet another CRM, but like, hey, we can grow with you. We can be your marketing automation. We can then also be your CRM for your sales. And then they started adding these other pieces. But the idea is that you got to find these things that agitate people. And so I would want to find out, what are those things? And that's one way of creating a moat. One story, and I'll make this really quick, is that at my last in-house role, we basically were wrapping vehicles all over the country. The biggest problem is that people were asking for quotes to get vehicles wrapped, but they wouldn't get anyone calling them. They wouldn't get anyone responding to them. None of that stuff. They didn't get instant pricing. So what did we do? We literally created a calculator that gave you instant pricing. Now, as you as a CTO, you're like, that's not really that brilliant. But for the consumer, that's like groundbreaking. All of a sudden, like, you have an instant price. Now, does that mean that it's exactly what you're going to pay? Not necessarily, but it gives you a quote and you have an idea of like, okay, I'm going to be spending $3,500. And so you just got to find what that thing that really makes people mad, and you agitate the heck out of it. And then you provide it, you like, here you go. And that's the easiest way to kind of come out with like moats and new products.
I like the way the use of the word agitate there. I've never seen it be used in that context, but it makes sense. What you're saying there is identify the pain points, because if you say, hey, your life is going to be a little bit better, maybe that's not good enough. But if you're going to say that I'm going to make a difference to your lifestyle, maybe fundamentally, right? There are things that you're doing that you could be doing a lot faster, better, or cheaper and whatnot.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Now you're talking to the founders. You kind of understand what they're trying to do, and you sort of know or find out what's happening in the market. You identify those gaps, and let's call some of them features, right? You mentioned the calculator there. You're like, you know what? Maybe this doesn't take your team a whole lot of time to build, but maybe that's going to make a difference. But now let's come to today, right? Where building prototypes was not necessarily very easy like 2 years ago.
Yep.
You also needed developers to do it, people who understood programming. That's certainly not the case today, right? I've been talking to a lot of people, about vibe coding and beyond, where just about anybody who's never written code can actually see their ideas through to fruition, either all the way to production or at least past prototyping. So now you don't as somebody who's joining those teams, Javier, I'm assuming you're not having to do the imagining anymore, because you're expecting people to show you what it is, because it's not that difficult to do that anymore. So now that you have that prototype with you, let's say you do have that for a project management software, what do you do with that? How do you then do you play with that product, use it, digest it, kind of identify its gaps from what other providers in the market might actually have, competitors? Or how do you go about telling the team, I saw this, I reviewed it, I audited this, here are the good pros and cons, this is a decent enough idea for you guys to chug along, or maybe you should do something else? How do you come to that conclusion?
So what I've always believed that you never go to market with like solving all things. You always go to market with the most narrow niche thing that you can kind of go and you can crush. And so what I would say is that as we're kind of building this out, where do we feel the most comfortable that's going to have the most impact? From like, hey, we can close this in our sleep. If we have these pieces lined up, this and this can be done, close it in our sleep. You can have the worst salesperson and it still closes. And so that's going to be one way of kind of looking at it, is not kind of going in like, HubSpot never came into market basically saying we are your everything. They came to market of like, hey, we have this hub and we have these spokes. And they came in with one thing. And that's kind of how I would look at it as well too, is really think about, like, all right, let's focus on one thing that's going to help us kind of differentiate from there. The next piece is really like, there's a few ways on how to do this. I really believe in founder-led type marketing, and I know that it's like your traditional thought leadership, but like there's something to be said behind that. A founder-led brand stands out, and if that person is well connected and they have a good network, whether it's on LinkedIn or any other community, and their voice is listened to, especially if you're in a technology space, like you guys have tight-knit communities, and there's some folks that really like their voice carries beyond that. And so what I would lean into those pieces where we can say, okay, this could be our differentiator from like 0 to 1. This could be like our $0 to like 2 million, where we can ride on the founder, the CTO, whomever, on to this point, because we can leverage their network. We can leverage them in a certain way. I would work with that leader and start designing the right type of messaging that's going to essentially resonate when not just in their voice, but also like that it's going to kind of like agitate and kind of contrarian type point of views. So if you're talking about software for project management, like let's piss some people off. Let's say a few things that's going to kind of ruffle some feathers and say like, this is I can't believe we're doing this, and I can't believe this is accepted. The best example I can think of is Apple. Apple did that in the marketplace. And that's why, like, what happened is that the way Apple came out and really started kind of throwing rocks at all the other people, they were like, hey, you don't deserve this. You deserve better. And we're going to be the leaders in throwing rocks at PC users. Now, if you're a PC user, I'm not trying to knock you, but I'm just talking about the story here. But it then all of a sudden kind of started going down from the top down. Steve Jobs started it and it went all the way down. That's the approach. And that's when you create a movement, that's going to get people to start buying in or start looking. They're like, interesting. These guys are doing something a little different. And it's like, it's still a computer. It still does the same thing. It can run, all these other softwares and searches and whatever, but like they're doing something a little different. And then you start kind of seeing what people are clinging on to. And once you figure out, they're like, oh, they're clinging on to this thing and this thing. Ah, interesting. Okay. There's more of you people. I know where you are. And we start leaning into that. So I don't want to say it's a science. I don't want to say it's art. I think it's a combination. It's really understanding human psychology and how people think and buy and make transactions. But at the same time, it's also understanding like, okay, like we've got to like gamify this thing a little bit.
I love it that you said it's not art nor science, and it's both, because I've asked people in a variety of scenarios outside of this type of conversation if something was art or science, because I always thought that answered a few questions for me. Okay, you said a number of important things there. Two things I want to ask you. No, it's good. I'm glad you said that. So the two things I want to ask you as a follow-up to that is, Mark Zuckerberg had said in one of the podcasts not too long ago, that, or maybe in a commencement speech or something, that ideas are never fully formed, right? So he said, don't wait for that perfect idea. Have an idea, get started. And he's as good a person to say that as any, because every time they report their earnings, you see Reality Labs is like his pet child or something that has been reporting losses for like years. But they have, of course, they're making money in tons of other ways and other sources within the company. But there is this division that's not making money, but clearly they're trying out different ideas. So with that as context, Javier, ideas are not fully formed. You need to get started somewhere and keep making improvements. Add to that the fact that founders, I can't speak to every engineering founder, but I can speak to people like me for the most part. Mm-hmm. We do get sometimes tied to our ideas, right? And we get very emotional about it because we feel like we've done our due diligence. We've thought through this. We've started building it. We've produced a lot of code with or without AI. So we've made the effort, and for someone to come and tell us, particularly from the outside world, which is the right thing to do, right? There's no bias, but sometimes we don't come to terms with reality as soon as we should, right? We get into defensive mode. So given the fact that ideas are not fully formed, which means you got to take some idea and improve upon it and iteratively, and add to the fact that we've got emotions attached to our products, our babies.
Hmm.
How do you maneuver and navigate through this complex web of
I love,
scenarios here?
yeah, I love that question. I'm a believer in shipping early, shipping fast, and let the marketplace determine what is good and bad. Okay. I'm a believer in that. And so, and when I say shipping early, shipping fast, like if it's at 60%, 70%, ship it. Like something that I always tell this story too, and you're probably familiar with this, that Google, when they came out with Gmail, I think it was in beta for like 10 years. 10 years. Okay.
It's probably
Like
still in beta. Just kidding.
exactly. Right. Right. But my point being here is that they just shipped it. They shipped it. It was a side project that was probably done on Fridays, because I believe how Google would operate is like, Monday through Thursday was their primary project. And then like on Fridays would be like their side project they want to kind of do what was fun. And Gmail kind of just came out of that. And then it was in beta for 10 years. But the idea here is that you ship something, and you just are, this is the hardest part, especially for founders, because they put their blood, sweat, and tears into all of this. They code something like, man, this is amazing. I'm so proud of this. You almost have to play this whole agnostic kind of approach where I'm just going to ship this, what I believe is good. Okay. And I think directionally it's going to help, solve this problem, but I'm going to let the marketplace determine the direction of where to go next, what they like, what they don't like, and not get married to everything behind it. Because I get it. Like, you put your blood, sweat, and tears behind that. Like, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to code, but I understand like the ambition and this just like what drives them to do that, why they're doing it. But when you take a step back again, and I keep saying like taking a step back, but when you take a step back, like, and you just start saying, okay, I'm going to let the marketplace determine what's good. That's how I've always approached marketing, is that I like to ship quickly and get that feedback loop as quickly as I can, because the more I ship, the more people are like, oh man, these guys are active. They got this going on. They got this press release going on. They've got these emails going on. They have these ads going on. They have all this organic stuff going on. They're doing a lot of stuff. And then you look under the hood, and it's just like, a small team, and they're just like, scrambling, dumpster fire going on everywhere. But no one is married to what's working. They're married to what the feedback loop is, what the marketplace is telling them. And then they just start pivoting. They're like, okay, this didn't really stick. We need to try this instead. Oh, you know what? This one stuck really well. Okay, let's dig in a little bit further into that. And that's how I would approach it. And I would encourage founders such as yourself that are building and creating to just, try to get the emotions out of it. Like, put your passion into putting that first piece out, but know that the marketplace is going to determine what good and bad is. And so it's kind of how I've looked at it in my experience.
I wish I could disagree with something that you said there. Unfortunately, right? Not fortunately. Unfortunately, I cannot disagree. But here is a challenge, right?
Okay.
Me and a lot of people like me, right? Engineering founders, particularly, right? I cannot speak as much to non-engineering founders because the thought process there is very different, and there's pros and cons on both sides.
Yeah.
I've always thought that I would have rather been that non-engineering founder, but it is what it is, right? You got to take what you have and then roll with that. But so I'll tell you, Javier, that I not only agree with everything that you said there, but I also want to say that some of that, a fair bit of that was obvious to me. Not obvious because I'd done this, right? It's not because it's obvious, but it's because I've been in the business of building software. But that did not preclude me from making certain mistakes. And here is what I mean by that. I'm going to take two random examples. Hopefully, they make some sense in the context of our conversation. I'm going to take a non-engineering example just to help articulate my thought process here. It's going to be a restaurant, and it's going to be Seinfeld, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Seinfeld as a show.
Love Seinfeld.
A lot of our audiences, at least the majority of our audiences in the US, so they are. So let's take a restaurant. Now, I'm opening a new restaurant, and maybe everything should apply to a software company, but I'm just taking a restaurant here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to sell Indian food, right? Maybe in Northern Virginia, where I'm located.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my idea as a founder is have a fine dining restaurant in this particular location. It's got certain kinds of lighting, some artwork in the restaurant, and maybe I'm serving a certain type of Indian cuisine, right, which is very broad. So I narrow it down to one kind of cuisine within Indian cuisine.
Yep.
And I want to do this. Now, there's a number of things I've got to do, but like if you extrapolate this to going lean and MVPs, I cannot possibly do all of it. Now, the challenge we have as founders is to figure out, should I be selling just the food and putting a table outside the restaurant that's not completed its construction and tell if Javier likes the food I'm going to cook?
Hmm.
Or should I just get the restaurant in place so it looks pretty, beautiful? It gives you this really nice experience of dining. So you almost do not care about the quality of the food or the taste of the food that you might put in your mouth. I don't know. I want to open a restaurant. I want to make some money. I love the food business. How do I, as the founder, tell which way to go? And I'll complete my question with Seinfeld because it adds a little bit more complexity to this.
Yeah.
Seinfeld is one of the most popular shows, right? As we know,
Yep.
10 seasons and whatnot. But the first 12 to 18 months, my understanding is they had a really, really tough time, right?
Mhm.
I mean, nobody liked it. I mean, they had the blessing of a networking world, not networking people to people. I meant in the media and a network
Yep.
where they were given the opportunity to let it run for that much time, which probably is not the case today, right? So the
Yeah.
two sides to what I'm trying to say there is one, how do I pick whether I should sell the food or the dining experience? And two, sometimes even if you do the best things, it can take time. Like Seinfeld took 18 months,
Hmm.
and not always do you have the time, depending on how the market perceives what you're doing and what
Yeah.
the needs happen to be. So these are unrelated yet related, I think, in some way, form, or shape.
Yeah.
How do you navigate these two things?
So, honestly, I don't think there's one path that's better than the other. It's a matter of is picking and choosing the path that you're going to go to and committing to that path. And I know it's probably not the answer that you were probably thinking or expecting, but the reason I say that is because you can make both paths work very well. I mean, you can go the cuisine side where it's like, we're going to put everything into this, and you can go food truck style, if you will. You're like, we're going to start off with a food truck, we're going to build our following, and we're going to do it like this. We're going to go lean, and then we're going to get get people to buy in. Then we'll put some tables in the front to see people sit around, and then we're going to get to a restaurant. Like, that's fine. Like that works very well. It has been proven, and people have been very successful doing that. Then you've got the other side of it, where you want to create the experience. You not only do you want them to experience not just like the cuisines themselves, but you want the atmosphere to kind of go along with it. You want a certain maybe type of wine list that goes along with it. Whatever that case is, and that's going to take a little bit more time. It's going to take a lot more investment. You're not going to have a lot more of that feedback loop quickly. But you're willing to kind of sacrifice some of the things that you may not get for just launching and going and getting the feedback loop immediately. Do I think one is better than the other? I mean, I've got my personal bias, but then I also know that if you lean into one or the other, what you need to do is you need to build that strategy correctly. And just kind of like how I talked about it earlier is like, you got to find what those agitating things that you need to kind of hit, what those things that really set you apart, and really kind of like lean into those pieces, as opposed to like, hey, we're just another Indian cuisine, we're just another restaurant that's just going to be great, and it's going to make you happy, and we serve naan, and we have rice, and we have this and that, and we have curry. Great, like you're just like everybody else, and really from there is then telling the story, because some people have a great story behind it. It could be like, hey, this recipe has been passed on 8 generations, and this is what my great grandma used to make, or whatever the story is there. But then lean into that story and build that story so that people buy into it. I think the reason that Seinfeld was so successful is that as they were building stories within that, people were buying into these really funny, weird stories. And so it's a matter of like, okay, we're on to something. It's not really catching on. How can we build a story? Excuse me. How do we build a story around that? And when you start building stories around that, people start kind of getting attached to it. And again, you can pick one path or the other. It does not matter. But then you want to couple that with what your go to market, and then you want to also then couple that with like the messaging and story that you're trying to tell, so that starts resonating, because then other people will start telling that story as though they lived it first person. They're like, well, no, this is how it was. Like Steve Jobs did this, or this is what it was when Seinfeld kicked off. Like, and that's when you have something going, in my opinion, because you've tied the right story behind what your movement is.
You said that beautifully because, I had a founder, somebody who runs a data center. I ran into him in a recent conference, and he told me, and he gave me a piece of advice, and it was very good. I appreciated that. He said, Krish, people remember stories more than products, right? So you always
Yes.
have to leave. And, he was on stage and talking about the energy needs of data centers. And I think one of the things he shared was for a 1 gigawatt in a data center, it would consume as much energy as 1 million single family homes. And when
Mhm.
he said that, everyone's like, everybody lives in a house, right? Generally. So you're able to make the connection there. And if you forgot everything else about that conversation, you would actually at least remember this, right? So the story that you mentioned there, I can see that as being extremely important, right? So whether what you sell, the food, the experience, and how much time you have and what adjustments you make, you've got to have a story. Now let's
Yeah.
sort of shift gears a little bit. Now that you've
Okay.
understood the team, you've understood what they're doing, you're starting to review it and do some auditing there. You're looking out to see what what problems they're trying to solve, what they should be doing differently. You have
Mhm.
some sense of the market, and you've gotten started there.
Yep.
Now the team is going back to making some changes, and you're closely engaged with the team, Javier. How do you now bring the first users? Not paid, maybe unpaid users, does not matter. Not your friends and family because they're going to be nice to you and tell you what you want to hear.
Mhm.
People who really are going to not care for your emotions and give you proper judgments and opinions. How do you find those people? How do you engage those people? Because they don't know you, they don't know your
Mhm.
product, and they clearly don't have a need for your product because they don't even know you or your product. So, how do
Yeah.
you find them? How do you engage them? And what does that process look like?
Yeah. So, once we've kind of essentially mapped out, how I kind of like, build it out is we know what the ideal customer profile looks like. And then, what that person is going to, the buyer, what marketplace do they serve? What is the total addressable market going to look like? Like all these things, I'm looking to see like, how can we start narrowing this down more? My goal isn't necessarily to go wide. My goal is to go narrow and go as deep as possible. So when I create marketing strategies overall, like I want to be marketing to Krish. I don't want to be marketing to other people that are like Krish. Not yet. I'm marketing to you, and I'm talking to you, and I'm positioning the product to you to solve. And so I'm looking for that one person. And so that's kind of what I did when I was at my last in-house job. Is we knew that our buyer was a small business owner that was running a home services company. All right, so basically blue collar kind of approach. They talk a certain way, they make decisions a certain way. Like they're always busy, they're on their phone. And so what we did is we essentially created our messaging around that. And then what we would then slowly do is we offered something that was easy for them to come on board. So I would say if you can offer an easy, and I know it sounds silly to say like, a lead magnet, but not even that. Maybe it's a tool that lets them kind of like test something out. One of my favorite offers is Canva. Canva is, you can literally use their product for free. That is amazing. You can go in there, use Canva for free. And if you want some of the other features, then you can upgrade. But they let you use everything for free. And so if you're using, some of the other Adobe tools, it's kind of like crap. These guys are going to market with free. Now, is freemium the solution to everything? No, not necessarily. I'm just simply saying like you just got to find what that hook is going to get them into the door. HubSpot, has a great one where they do an analysis on your website, like a speed test and some other things like SEO testing or whatever, and you put your domain in there, and and it does an analysis on that. That's another great tool. I would find some sort of tool that is very low friction, that is easy to get in there and be like, oh man, this is great. Not it doesn't have to be a freemium. It can be like a little test. It could be a diagnostic. It just depends on what your product or service is. And when you lead with those things, knowing that like, all right, I'm willing to give you 25%, 50% of like what the full usage of this product is so that you have an idea to see what it's like, then that gives you some great feedback because then hey, this bait that I'm trying is working. And the way I'm positioning the bait is actually kind of like, it's working for Krish and like he's actually interested. And then from there, you start getting feedback. You obviously want to start, sending out, maybe following up with them via email or maybe it's a phone call, whatever the case is, but ask them their experience. Like the most important piece here, in my opinion, is once people come in and use it and they experience it, like you need to get that feedback loop as quickly as possible when they're most fresh, and just really like take all the good and take all the bad and really just like run with it because that is the best opportunity. So to go back to initially, I would find that hook that gets them into the door that is very low friction.
Okay. So you said, of the many things that you said there, one of the things I want to follow up on is a couple of things I want to follow up on, Javier, is you said not going broad necessarily, going narrow and specific. So you are a small company, right? Let's say you're a
Yeah.
startup. You want to keep that focus. Great
Yep.
point. And you also mentioned ideal customer profile, right? Couldn't agree more.
Hmm.
Here's the challenge one more time. How do you find that ideal customer? In other words, two-part question.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we launched our project management software or the mobile app or the APIs, for instance, or our
Hmm.
education platform, we had an ideal customer profile in mind and
Hmm.
we started looking for that. There's two challenges there from the get go.
Hmm.
Our definition of that ideal customer profile was not necessarily spot on, right? We
Okay.
recognized as we engaged with people that maybe who we thought we were looking for were not the people we should have been looking for, or we were not actually looking for, right? There was a bit of a learning there, a lot of mistakes and some learnings. How do
Hmm.
you navigate those? And the second part is, once you do have some sense of what that ideal customer profile looks like, what are some ways to reach out to those ideal customers? Because the way we've tried a few different options, but
Hmm.
at two ends of the spectrum, we start out with a very automated sales platform that would send
Hmm.
emails to hundreds of people per day.
Yep.
Surely you have to warm up your email domain, you have to do n
Yeah.
number of things to get to that point of time.
Yeah.
And even when that happens, a lot of these tools like the email servers like Outlook and Gmail have gotten a lot smarter. So they send 95% of your emails to junk folders right away, right? So
Yep.
you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to these sales platforms that promise you glory and that you can reach out to 1,000 Javier Lozanos, right? But
Yep.
not even one Javier will look at it because it hit the spam or inbox, the junk folder right away.
Yeah.
Problem number one. The
Yeah.
second part of it was we started using LinkedIn more carefully, spending a lot of time trying to find out Javier and seeing if he is the ideal customer for us to prospect.
Hmm.
That takes a lot of time, a
Yep.
lot of time. And
Yep.
then the response rates are different for different scenarios. If someone told me 3 years ago you would have a 3% response rate, I'd be like, get out, I don't even do that. But if today someone told me, Chris, you'll have a 1% response rate, I will shamelessly take that approach on the platform, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just sharing a few different approaches that we've tried as a company as we
Yeah.
dig deeper, go deeper into our conversation. I want to
Yep.
get your thoughts on what works, what doesn't work, and what do you recommend as strategies,
I love this.
ranging from a sales automation platform to a very targeted LinkedIn prospecting process.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this is that as you're building a new software and you're going to market with your positioning and what you're going to go with, there's going to be a lot of hypotheses made, with this. So that's going to be including also your ICP, and that's okay. Like it is like because if you're going to market with 60 to 70%, maybe 80%, all right, we're pretty confident this is going to be it. You're not going to always be hitting it 100%. And so it's you first you've got to have like the whereabouts and the willingness to be like, okay, we went after this industry that didn't really hit. So let's pivot and let's try to either go adjacent or let's rethink this thing. That's the one piece. The next piece, it's positioning yourself as an authority in that space for what you're offering. And so I think that plays a big role. And I kind of touched this a little bit earlier about leaning into the founder when it comes to like a founder-led type of growth. And when I'm saying by the authority piece, it's like jumping on podcasts. I think this is a huge thing. I can promise you there are plenty of podcasts out there for CTO founder type companies that you can position yourself as the authority of X, Y, and Z kind of, product launch that you've done. And it's really putting yourself out there. Another one, like what you have right now, your own podcast. That is a great way of developing that authority. And the reason I'm saying these things is because a lot of us have these, it's easy to start a podcast. Like I've got one, you've got one, a bunch of folks have them, but it's hard to be committed to doing that podcast every week, every other week, whatever the cadence is. And so when you show up all the time, people start saying like, oh man, this person keeps showing up and they keep delivering. They keep delivering high quality content. So that's one piece. It's really positioning yourself on as the authority. The other part I would probably start leaning into as well too is essentially like going back into communities And this is where in my opinion, again, communities are huge, whether it's on Discord, whether it's on, I'm not going to say Facebook groups, but like other groups that are out there, like Circle or private communities that you got to pay for to be a part of. Those communities really do matter, in my opinion. And so what I would lean into is really start, positioning and getting feedback from folks of like, hey, I'm launching this and I'm doing this and I'm wondering, and get feedback from there. And people will start telling you, how to get involved. But I guess where I'm kind of coming with all of this is that you've got to hit publish in some way, shape, or form. Whether that is being active on social media, on LinkedIn, and being a thought leader, whether that's being a podcast guest or a podcast host, or both, whether that's being a part of a community and really kind of bringing some things to light and having contrarian point of views. It does not matter, but you need to put yourself in the authority position. That changes the game, in my opinion. I mean, I've grown a business literally leaning on my authority. And when I say authority, I don't mean as in like telling people what to do. I mean as a leader of a voice of like that understands this, that gets it. Now, do I know all the answers? No, I don't know all the answers, but I know quite a bit of them, And so that's kind of where I would lean into, is that piece. Eventually, you will get the signals that are coming in. You will start seeing signals of like, hey, we're getting these types of people that are coming in. They're actually in this niche. They're in this industry. That's interesting. I'm like, okay, let's lean in a little bit more into this and see if we get any other signals. All of a sudden, those signals will reveal where to start kind of putting your energy towards your go-to-market motion for that.
Javier, this is great, but it seems very difficult. Can you give us a strategy where we can do something and the next morning we wake up, everything is worked out beautifully well? No, I'm just kidding. I couldn't agree more there, because having done not one, but I don't know how many, probably a 400 podcasts, as this is not our main business, right? We do this for inbound marketing for that authority, for the very same thing that you mentioned there, right? So hit the nail in the coffin there. It's very important to be consistent. And I'll call out for what you said there with just one more example that I can think of. I think Jensen Huang had said in one of the conversations that I'd heard online that, you look at somebody like him, regardless of the fact that he's running the largest company, even if he ran the smallest one, you couldn't not respect the man any lesser, because he has that aura around the way he behaves and walks and talks, right? He mentioned that people always say that you've got to do what you love, and every single day you got to do that. I think he said something along the lines of, that may not always happen, because he's like, there are days that you're going to have to do things that you actually do not like to do.
Yep.
In quest of the greater good, right? And he shared about things that he had done in the course of his career, starting from, I think, being a janitor to running the world's largest company. But the key takeaway for me from that part of his conversation, Javier, was consistency, right? A lot of people can do many things one time.
Yes.
Some people can do a few things a couple of times. But I've seen that very few people can do one or many things till eternity, right? Because, it's like one of those graphics where you keep trying to find your gold or diamond, and then you're so close to it, but then you give up, and it was like 10% away, that you give up a little too soon. So it requires a tremendous amount of patience. That's what takes me to my next question. What are some tenets or traits that you expect for founders to have to be able to pull this through? I mean, you mentioned a good moat. You mentioned a lot of these strategies. That's all of it is good and well and technical. What are some intangible soft skills that you expect people to have to survive this world, right? Because, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. And it's not going to be, motivating sometimes, right? You got to find your own motivation, self-motivation on a daily basis. I'm speaking through experience here.
Yeah.
What are some things that you look for or you recommend that people have as traits that will see them through versus traits that will actually set them up for failure?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is I mean, you kind of alluded to this, but it's patience. It's actually having the fortitude to sit down and just be patient and know that showing up every day is actually, I would say, 99% better than what everybody else is doing. Having the patience to, Like, hey, I'm a great example is if you're going to be going on LinkedIn and posting content, don't expect that, everything to work out in, 3 days a week for a month. It's no different from working out. It's no different from a workout program. Like, you've got to have the patience. You got to show up every single day or whatever that cadence is. And then I would say from there, like, as you build that patience, you need to actually, how I look at it is, you need to lower your expectations a little bit. So I've been reading this book that's called The Gap in the Gain. And what happens is that a lot of us get into what's called the gap, where we have these ideals where we expect to be. Oh, I expect us to be at X amount by the end of 26. And if you don't hit those numbers, then you sit and you start beating yourself up. And you start saying, like, man, like, we didn't do it, or it's somebody else's fault. They didn't, create the right strategy correctly, or we got led the wrong direction. When really, if you did this, where you looked at the gain, where you were at the beginning and where you are today, and you look at that trend line and that gain, you're like, oh man, we've actually made progress here. Like, yeah, we didn't hit our ideal goal of what we're trying to achieve, but we're actually growing in these other areas, and here are some of the gains. And so you start celebrating, you start looking for those gains. So, like, I look at it as it's a patience play. And the other part is that you're in this for the it's an infinite game. Business is an infinite game. It's not like an end goal. It's not like basketball, where like the time runs out and there's a score of like 102 to 100 and there's a winner. Business is an infinite game, and your goal is to keep playing. And if you keep playing, you're winning. Every time you're able to keep playing and keep playing and keep playing, you're winning. And I heard that from I think I heard it from Alex Hormozy, I believe, saying that's kind of what you're trying to play in a sport kind of setting, if you will. And when I start hearing that, like the patience piece, and then always kind of trying to operate more in a gain mindset, and then also trying to just like, hey, I just want to keep playing the game as far as like the game of business. If you're doing those things and you're putting those types of people around you, those types of leaders that believe in that, then I think that's going to start shifting. But it starts from the top. It starts from the CEO. It starts from the founder. They have to set the tone there, because the leader is going to actually set the tone and the direction. If the company is not doing well, failing, or whatever, it's really going to be based on their tone and how they did that and how they led in those pieces. And so, do they have the patience? Do they have the fortitude? Are they operating in a gap or a gain? Are they playing for the long haul? Or are they looking for a quick exit by next year? Like a 10x multiplier that's not going to be, real, because we all know the market's a little different. Like it's those little things. And so I don't think there's like one answer to that, but it's a mindset thing. It's just like, how can you get either you're wired a certain way, or how can you rewire yourself internally to start accepting that?
Javier, you have great answers, obviously. But you articulate them very well as well. So it doesn't hurt, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of quick questions for you. As we get to the tail end of this conversation.
Yeah.
How much time do you have, so I know how many questions I can squeeze in there?
I've got time, man. You keep asking them. I'll keep firing away.
Okay. And whenever, it's too much, just let me know, because I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to lose track of time here.
All good.
And as quickly as you can, for some of these, your answer there was spot on. Let me share an experience,
Okay.
A real life experience as well. One of the reasons people ask me, Krish, why did you start the company, right? There's many reasons. Some of the reasons were because they have changed. I wanted to be my own boss, right? I thought, you know what, you start your company, I can be my own boss. I want to make a lot of money. I said, okay, start a company, you can make a lot of money. I want to work fewer hours, right? I didn't want to like commute and work 40 hours a week. I'm like, you know what, maybe I can make a lot more money in much shorter time, so that I'll be in great shape. I did not care for layoffs and uncertainties in the market. So I wanted something that had a lot less uncertainty. You know where I'm going with this.
Oh, totally. 100%.
You start the company. You don't make any more money than you did for a long, long time till things do happen. You spend more, more of your own money.
Yeah.
40 hours a week. I don't even know what that means, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea what that even means, right? You work a lot more hours. In terms of being your own boss, that's the last thing I can even think it's true, because you're driven by your clients, potential clients, whether or not they're paying you, you still have to listen to them.
Yeah.
You're listening to your employees, you're listening to people, you're listening to everybody but yourself sometimes. So
Yep.
you're far from being your own boss.
Yep.
In terms of certainties and uncertainties, yeah, sure, Amazon's laying off 15,000 people. You have no control, but there's a lot less control you have when you run a small company, right?
Correct.
So there are days you wonder, can I not find an easier path? It's almost like the poem Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken.
Yeah.
Uh, there's got to be an easier way to make money. There's got to be an easier way to live life. But some of us continue to deny those seemingly easier approaches
Hmm.
and do whatever it is that we've resorted to do. What are some reasons that you've seen in your experience of working with founders of companies of all sizes, Javier, that keeps them going?
You know, I mean, it's a cliche answer, but like, you know, you've got your why, you know, why are you doing it? And I'm not saying that's like, should be what should, you know, drive you to do it. But I think it's, I almost leaning to more of like this purpose. Like, why do you think you were put on this earth? You know, what's your purpose? And what is it really to write software? I think it's more, you know, behind that. It's not just to write software and, you know, and solve a problem. It's not that. And so you really got to find what that purpose is. Like, you know, for myself, I realized what my purpose was as I kind of grew my entrepreneurial career. My first company was an SMB company. I did martial arts and personal training, ran that for 10 years and sold it. In that process, I realized that my purpose wasn't what I was doing, but that was a stage that I needed to hit. And what I realized is that I'm really good at teaching. I'm really good at helping. And that gave me the platform to start teaching and helping people. So I'm like, okay, my purpose is a little different. So I went into basically corporate, working in house, eventually became a CMO for a startup company, and then now I'm doing fractional work. And so what I've done is that I've taken these things that I've learned, and my purpose is to help companies grow and grow less chaotically. Like every company is going to grow in some way, shape, or form chaotic. But it's more predictable, and I find joy in that. And so it's finding the purpose that gives you joy, that you're like, you know what? I know I'm putting 80 hours a week, but like, this is kind of cool. Like, I don't mind doing this, you know, and being your own boss, like that doesn't exist. I mean, we all answer to somebody, whether it's your customer, whether it's your wife, whether it's your family, it does not matter. We all answer to somebody. But really it's like, what are you willing to kind of like give up? Like a great example I would say is that like my son plays basketball. And so he's part of the all-star team. And so he was playing for like 20 more minutes after practice on Monday. And he's like, I'm sorry I stuck around longer. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, you wanted to shoot around. I'm all for it. Like, I want you to play to play. Like, you should enjoy playing. Why do we look at people that want to play sports, and if they want to play a little bit longer, why do we look at them as like, hey, that's awesome? But then also we look at people that want to do what they love doing, like whether it's writing code or starting a business or, you know, helping coach, as like, well, you should cut it off at 40 hours. Like, I didn't realize that should be a cutoff point, because to some people it's play to them, it's joy, you know. And so you've got to find that balance for you. I mean, and only you can find that. And so someone brought that example up to me once. I don't know where I got that from, but when I heard that, I'm like, that's totally true. You know, where I'm okay putting 60, 70, 80 hours a week in something that brings me joy, because it's like my sport, if you will. You know, like, I'm not saying that, you know, business is sports, but like if we're talking sports terminology, it's almost the same thing.
These days, no conversation is complete, no dinner is complete, no movie is complete, no workout is complete if you did not talk about AI, right? That's just the way things work, right? That's
Yep.
part of every conversation.
Yep.
There's different schools of thought, different levels of anxieties and excitement and whatnot. And I've had a lot of conversation in the last many months with folks such as yourself, Javier, and to learn how AI, how they receive it, what kind of impact it has on them.
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, you know, as a fractional CMO, right? I mean, I can speak to it as a developer and a CTO, but how does it impact your job? How excited are you with things that are happening? And I'm going to sort of give you some premise there. Just humor me for a second there. I'm going to get through some of the answers that I've heard. So just to make your life a little bit more difficult, so we get past that phase of those answers. And if you disagree with those, we can certainly talk about them. But if you do agree with those, I want to hear something outside of that from you, right? If possible.
Okay.
People tell me, Krish, it's making me more productive, so I'm happy, right? I can do more in the same day that I have using these tools, so I'm not complaining.
Mhm.
People tell me that it's going to be here for the long run, for the long haul, so I cannot be in denial. So
Mhm.
anxieties aside, I'm going to have to upskill myself and learn the tools. Whether you're a developer or a lawyer or a general practitioner or whatever it is that you are, you're going to
Yeah.
have to use AI in the mix of things. People tell me that without having all the skills that they have, they're able to do stuff, get stuff done. Founders who have launched software companies without knowing anything about coding, or even working with non-coders, they're able to get stuff done. So
Mhm.
AI has clearly brought more to the table in that sense. They need less money to get more stuff done, right? All of that is sort of given. I'm just going to throw that out on the table.
Mhm.
Outside of this, uh, you know, and one last thing to say there is, people always ask me, and I'm sure they've asked you as well. Tell me if it's otherwise. Hey, Javier, do we need to hire you to do certain things? Because can I not have the tool do it for me?
Yeah.
Or if the tool cannot do all of it for me, what is it that you can do above and beyond what the tool can do? Because if both of us are using Chat GPT and all these models, why am I paying you to use the models? Because one last thing to say there, Javier, excuse my long question. I did a podcast recently, a solo podcast, where I talked about these enterprise software companies like CRM, ServiceNow, Team, Adobe, Monday, and Asana, and a number of companies we talked about that have lost 2/3 of their market value in the last 12 to 18 months, right?
Mhm.
Because people are actually able to do more, get more stuff done without relying on these platforms.
Mhm.
Given all of that, outside of all of this, I want to make your life as difficult as possible. What are some things that you're seeing that's impacting you personally and professionally when it comes to AI? And how are you navigating and maneuvering those challenges? And what would you tell other people by virtue of those learnings?
Yeah. So, I mean, you've already hit everything as far as like AI is here to stay. It's just what it is. Like you start using it, you got to figure out how to use it. However, I think people, and I would say, excluding people in the tech startup that are actually like CTOs like yourself, they know that AI can only get to so far, because if you don't think in systems and processes, then AI is going to expose what's broken within your business. Like some founders will go in and be like, "Oh, we can just have AI do this, and it should fix it. It should be fine." When in reality, like if you don't have like a system of like, "Hey, this is what happens in step one. This is step two," and then you go through that process, and then you don't find some sort of way to automate it, it's going to be breaking somewhere in the middle, and your excuse will always be, well, it's AI's fault. It's in reality, it's your fault. You didn't build this correctly for this bot to do its job. And so what I kind of wanted people to understand is that it's here to stay. We all know that. It's here to make us more productive. We all get that. Where we want to take it to the next level is we want to start changing how we're all thinking. As an engineer yourself, you think in those things. And not everyone does, though, because like I know as a marketer, like I've had to train myself to do that, but I was able to learn that because that's how I sold my first company, is because I created a system in my company that made it sellable outside of myself. And so when you're using AI, you want to think about that. So when you're building strategies within your company, you need to lay those things out. Now, the challenge here is that not everyone can see things strategically, because at the moment there's different models that can kind of think a little bit outside, but there's no human element of like of thinking in these kind of concepts. And so what you want to kind of do is you want to let those guardrails and put them down and allow how that's going to operate. And then from there you start navigating of like, okay, we're going to go this path in this kind of situation, we're going to go this path in this situation. So where I'm kind of wrapping that piece up, that answer to your question is that I think it's important that we don't think that it's going to just solve all things for us and we can just hit a button and it just kind of does it and we wake up and it's all done. It doesn't work like that. I really believe that we're heading in that direction, but we still need to start thinking in other ways to kind of like create the automations. And so I say that to my clients all the time, is that yes, AI can solve this, but like if we don't have the infrastructure set up, like it doesn't matter what it is. This is going to go, it's going to hallucinate. It's going to start making its own stuff up. It's going to go crazy. We all know, the stories. It's those things. And so when you do that, then you also have to have like, actual like QA where you're monitoring this stuff to make sure that it's firing correctly. So, like, is it going to replace us? No. I look at it as like basically a nail gun for like a carpenter or a builder. It's just making you build houses a little bit faster, and that's kind of what it is right now. Now, it might change 6, 12, 18 months from now because I didn't expect it to be where we are today and how quickly it's shifted the landscape. But, like as we speak right now, at the beginning of February, that's kind of where my head's at.
Thank you for that. I have two more questions for you, and then we are good. And after we wrap this up, Javier, if you could just hang on for a couple of minutes, I'd appreciate that. So the last two questions are, you can answer them in any particular order. Or the question is, what is your favorite food, comfort food? What's that one dish that you like to eat? And you can explain that a bit to our audience.
Yeah.
And the second question is, do you have any questions for me? And we can go in any order that you wish with those two.
Yeah. So favorite food, I would probably say I'd lean into like Japanese food, more like sushi. That is, I would say, one of my favorite cuisines is Japanese food. Like I went to Japan several years ago with my wife and was able to experience all of the fish and just a different type of like, experience than what we have in the US. So everything from your normal like rolls to like your actual sashimi and nigiri, like love all that stuff. And then, their noodles. So love Japanese food. I would probably put that up there in the, pretty high up on the top of the list.
The number of times I've had people tell me it's sushi on the podcast, I can't even tell you. It's like the hands down the winner so far. I think even by a distance, the number of people who've told me they like sushi and Japanese food. It's just remarkable. Huh. The next thing is, any questions you have for me?
Yeah. I mean, I guess my first one is that, what you kind of mentioned this, but what eluded you and prompted you to start this podcast? I know you use it as a inbound kind of motion as a way of doing that, but is there anything else that kind of like, led you to want to do this? Because there's not a lot of engineers that are willing to get behind get in front of a camera and, share their story, because I feel as though engineers have some of the coolest stories. I love engineers. They got some cool things to share. So I'm just kind of curious.
You were spot on there when you said engineers don't want to do this. I would rather someone else in my team actually does this so I could be doing something else. But nobody wants to turn on the camera. And I've even requested that don't even bother with the camera, just do an audio version or something. But it's not for everybody. Not everyone enjoys doing that, right? So great question. So we started this as a solo podcast, meaning we just shared our experience of running a company, things that we did right and not so correctly, whether it's creating campaigns on Meta, or building a mobile app, or writing code, or testing, or deploying, or reviewing code. Everything was mostly engineering related to help people who are starting companies. Because when we didn't find anything that was very hands-on. So the theory is good, but we wanted somebody to make those mistakes on camera to give me comfort that, okay, it's okay to make mistakes. Krish has been doing this for 20 years. He still doesn't seem to get it right. So which is all right? Some sort of that comfort. Yeah. That's why we started the podcast. Someone who I worked with, not at the company, but outside of the company, suggested one time, he said, Krish, it seems like you like talking. Maybe you should bring other people onto the podcast. Maybe you'll have a good time. I had never thought about it. And, as has been the case, Javier, the best comments, the best feedback, the best reviews that we've gotten, 99.999% of the time have been from strangers, from people who've had no ulterior motives or agenda, meaning if Snowpal did 10 times better, they stand to gain nothing, right? It's only from those people have we gotten a lot of this feedback. Certainly not from friends and family, right? I've got to say that. So he told me that I should bring some people in. I was like, really? I don't even know what might I even be talking about? He goes, I know somebody, or, let's start the first conversation. And I tell you that I enjoyed it quite a bit, that I was like, you know what? I've got to do this. Even if there was no real purpose, I would still do it. But that's how it started. Yeah.
I love that because, it's, you probably know Russell Brunson, the founder of ClickFunnels.
Right.
So he's a marketer. I get it. And he's not a true engineer, but he kind of knew what he wanted. But where I'm getting to is that he started publishing early, and even his newest, his things that were also like janky and old, and I can't believe he used to sell like that and market like that. He leaves it out there so people can see the growth and journey that they've gone through. And I feel as though that's what you've created. That is that growth and journey that people see. They're like, oh, that's really cool. Like Krish was like this, where he started to kind of talk about his experience, and now he's talking to these other leaders. Interesting. And they're a part of it. I look at it as like, if you're a music fan and you found a new musician that is like an underground musician, and you've been tracking them for the past 5 years, and all of a sudden they just break out, and everyone's like, have you ever heard of them? Like, yeah, I've known them for 5 years. It's kind of like that. And I think that's brilliant. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions? I'm more than happy to any number of questions you have.
Yeah. So if you had a chance to kind of like reflect on what you've been building, what would be the one thing that you would want to change that you're like looking back? Because as we all know, 2020, hindsight's 2020. Looking back, you're like, man, I wish we would have, done this instead. Like, what's that one thing that you would be like, I would change this if you would at all?
That's such a great question. I'll answer that with me asking my wife almost every other day, hey, Meena, if you go back 25 years, before I finish the question, she'll be like, Krish, do you want the honest answer or the answer you want to hear? I'll be like, you know what, why don't you give me the answer I want to hear? And she goes, nope, I would have married you and nobody else. Can we move on to the next conversation, right? No, I just want to share that, and I'll go to the real answer to your question. If I went back 5 years, I'll actually answer this differently from what I initially thought. When we are doing something today, Javier, given that AI is in the mix of things, we've taken a pause from the pace of work that we would generally do from an engineering standpoint, because we want to digest the tools and technologies that are out there in the market to see which ones might make the most sense to us. Yeah. So we are changing our ways of building software for sure as we speak right now. That being said, I also want to go back to answer your question. If I went back 5 years, the project management platform that we have solves a certain set of problems that we believe the other tools did not solve, but yet it's very traditional. You log in, you've got multiple ways to log in, single sign-on and whatnot. You have a dashboard, you can navigate through the Kanban and yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. If we were to do that today, it's not going. Someone asked me this question, actually, would you design it differently? I would like it not only differently, it would not look anything like what it does look today, right? Not even, there would be no semblance of what it looks, because we built it for humans. When you're building an application today, Javier, as you probably know, you're not only building it for humans, you're building it for AI agents as well. And maybe more so for AI agents. So how you start has to be completely different, right? So that's one example of how the approach would be radically different. And two, the composition of the team, the developers, the DevOps engineers, DevSecOps engineers or product managers, testers, Scrum masters and marketing people and advertising content creators. There was a certain mix of people we needed to have when we started the company. Mm-hmm. Say we needed 10 people. We could afford one person, right? That's how startups work, right? Yep, so you get that one person and dump everything else on them. But we needed those 10 people in the 10 roles, and those roles have changed dramatically. Yeah. So I asked people what the composition of their engineering teams should look like today or 6 months down the road. Mm-hmm. And if someone told me it should look similar to what it did a couple of years back, I personally would disagree. But that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong here, right? I think it has to look very, very different. Yeah. The type of engagement you're going to have also has to look different. And last but not least, if I went back 5 years, we wrote a lot of code. We did not have other things done before we got the first versions of our product out there. Mm-hmm. That is a mistake. The second mistake of the list of mistakes we've made and we've fixed ourselves and gone along is we try to get things to be much better than it should have been. And you mentioned that at the top of this conversation, get it out there. It could be ugly, it could be dirty, it could be broken, it could be buggy. I think the Airbnb founder said in one of the podcasts that, if things are not broken when they're in production, it means you waited too long. It's got to be broken when it is in production, because that tells me that you actually went to production sooner than you should have or you wanted to, right? But that's the right thing to do. We want to get every single thing ironed out, because I'd worked for large companies. They had the luxury of getting things right or being embarrassed about not getting things right, that they had to they couldn't take those chances. But that should have told me the opposite of what transpired, not what I should have done. So I would do it very differently, right? Ship sooner,
Interesting.
ship smaller, and so on and so forth. And the last thing is the product market fit. Sometimes, we have been married to our ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and it took us a little longer to come to terms with reality and say, you know what? Yep, we like it. We did the best we could, but the market's different from what you're expecting. People's expectations are different. I will
Yep.
give you one simple example. I had a friend who was organizing a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
The platform that we have will make your life much easier to plan a wedding, right? I mean, you can plan a wedding, have notifications, and it'll pop up on your mobile app. You have native mobile apps, and I couldn't do it otherwise. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no reason not to do it otherwise. But then when I talked to them, asked them, how did they plan the $60,000 wedding at the time or $70,000 wedding? She was like, I'm mostly on WhatsApp. I was like, oh my goodness. How in the world do you plan a $70,000 wedding on WhatsApp? It's chaotic. It's one thread with number of people and lots of groups. And I don't personally think it's the best way to do it. I personally think it's a terrible way to plan a wedding, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there are people doing it in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could either fight the trend and disagree with it,
Mm-hmm.
or look for those ideal customer profiles of people who would not plan a wedding on a WhatsApp platform, but would rather use a tool to doing that, right? There's plenty of tools geared towards weddings, and we are not a wedding platform, but we could also plan weddings on our platform, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
So there are
gotcha.
so many things that I would change, and I hope that we've made those changes.
Yeah.
That's the hope. But 5 years, it's what like Matthew McConaughey said in his Oscar speech. I don't know if you've heard that one. It's a brilliant speech.
I
If you
think I
haven't
have.
seen that, I highly recommend you do. Which is, that he's trying to chase his hero, but the
Yeah.
hero is always like 10 years away, and he's never going to get to meet his hero. But he keeps changing the line, the bar as to what
Yeah.
he needs to meet. And I think I love him as an actor, but I think I love that speech even more so than his movies, because he said it beautifully.
Yeah.
So I want to believe that I've learned all of those things,
Uh-huh.
but I will tell you, when tomorrow comes, I'll go back and like, oh my God, why did I do that yesterday? That doesn't make any sense, right? So I
I
think
feel
the
that, man.
willingness to accept that you're nowhere near even the perfect version of yourself that you want to be
Mm-hmm.
would be a learning. And this might sound cliched, my apologies, but I promise you that I did not have that learning 5 years ago. I was only
Yeah.
focused on churning code, creating repositories, reviewing them, getting the code clean, very clean, and as bug free as possible.
Yeah.
And then you realize that, what, like I said at the top of this call, great software sitting on my countertop here. Nobody's breaking in through the front door to grab that software. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to have to reach out to the larger world to do that. I know it was a long answer.
Yeah. No,
Brevity has
I
not
love
been
it.
my forte, but hopefully some of that made sense there.
No, I love that. I think that's great. No, those are kind of the big two things that I have, because everyone always looks at things differently, and I appreciate the context behind that.
Thank you. And then any closing comments before we end this? And before you have the closing comments, I'm going to just do an intro one more time.
Yeah.
Javier Lozano, fractional CMO, and we're going to include links to your LinkedIn profile. And I have another link here. I believe it's to your company, and I'm going to include both those links here.
Perfect.
So people can reach out, to you. This was a great conversation, Javier. I genuinely enjoyed your thoughts. And I had many learnings. One of the learnings was, Krish, lose your accent to the extent you can so people can understand you as well as they can understand Javier. And two, be able to articulate your thought process as well as Javier has been able to do in the last 60 minutes. So those were some of my learnings along the way. So much appreciate your responses, your ideas, and your advice to us.
Yeah, no,
That
thank you.
That said, what are your closing comments to our audience?
I hope, I think the one big thing I hope everyone gets out of this is that, is there's not really a true answer to everything. And so it's really just committing to what you're trying to get to, as far as go to market and how we do it. But then just take a step back sometimes. Just think about things first and be okay to ship things that are just, 50, 60, 70% done. So it's okay, because the market will help you kind of understand that. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I know that Krish is going to have the links in there, but you could always just search for me, Javier Lozano Jr. I believe I'm the only Javier Lozano Jr. on LinkedIn. So just connect me on there. If you have questions or anything like that, I love to engage and help people. But my goals are really just to make people just improve their businesses.
Perfect. With that, folks, we're going to end this podcast. Javier, please stay for a couple of more minutes. Thank you so much for your time. Until next time, bye bye.